Hey everybody, this is Owen from Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast, and before we get into the action today, I wanted to take a few seconds to talk about Anchor. Anchor is a great app and it is free to use. It's the easiest way to make a podcast. Did I mention it's free? There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will even distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. That's the Anchor app or anchor.fm to get started today. Happy podcasting. And now, let's get into it. All right, what's going on, everybody? This is Owen from Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast. Welcome in today to episode number 13. Today's topic is Pearl Jam's debut album, 10, released in 1991. I'm a big fan of this album. I'm a big Pearl Jam fan, so if you like grunge or Pearl Jam, this is the show for you. If you don't like either of those things, but you are interested in them and want to learn more, stay tuned for today's episode because it's going to be covering some of those topics. So let's get into the background of this album, and boy, there is a lot. The album was released August 27th, 1991, as I said, the debut album from Pearl Jam. In today's episode, we're going to be kind of unwrapping Pearl Jam's backstory, and then we'll go, as usual, the track-by-track breakdown throughout the album. So the album reached number 2 on the Billboard 200, being certified 13 times platinum by the RIAA, the Recording Industry Association of America. So, how did Pearl Jam get there? How did the band reach this point? That is the question. So, the band forms from many different bands out of the Seattle music scene. So the two main members, well, let's talk about the members first. So the main members who kind of form the band are Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament. They formed the band together, and they were kind of looking out to recruit new people that eventually lead to become Pearl Jam. So Stone Gossard, Jeff Ament are in a band called Green River. Green River has some tracks, some of which carried over to become tracks that were featured on the album 10, which we will be talking about today. So Green River, late 1980s, they break up, they kind of dissolve. But Gossard and Ament, both from the Seattle area, Green River was kind of a Seattle music scene band, they stay together and they begin to look for new members to start a new group. And a new group is eventually formed in the late 1980s after the Green River's separation, breakup, and that band is known as Mother Love Bone. Mother Love Bone also has Jeff Ament and Stone Gossard in it, and has a frontman, Andrew Wood. Andrew Wood dies of a heroin overdose in 1990, I believe. I want to make sure I get that date correct. Let's see, when did Andrew Wood... Yes, so March 19th, 1990 is when Andrew Wood passes away. It was a heroin overdose that killed him. So, once again, after Andrew Wood's overdose, Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament are left without a band at square one again. So, the guitarist for Pearl Jam, there's two guitarists, Stone Gossard, who we've kind of talked about from Green River and Mother Love Bone, he plays the rhythm guitar, and Jeff Ament, who the other guy I've been talking about, plays the bass guitar, and they're kind of friends. They're kind of looking to form this band. They met at a nightclub in 1984 in Seattle, and they formed Green River, and they were in Mother Love Bone together. So they're pretty good friends, and they're trying to build a band, obviously. But the current guitar player for Pearl Jam, Mike Mccready, the one who plays on 10, as I just said, his name is Mike Mccready. Mike Mccready was from Seattle, then he moved to LA and was in a band called Shadow. He played in another band when he was a younger guy in high school, middle school. And oddly enough, Stone Gossard knew Mike Mccready from They were maybe 14, 15 years old. They were teenagers. They knew each other. I believe it maybe was from middle school. And Mccready's band, Shadow, I think they were based out of LA or Central California maybe. They didn't really work out. So Mccready, he goes home to Seattle. He's working at an Italian restaurant. He is going to community college, I believe, and he's left kind of jaded by the music business, and he has thoughts of quitting the industry and just quitting music altogether. There's a party that happens, I believe, early 1990, or maybe 1991, early 90s. Gossard and Mccready meet up, and they're kind of reunited. So then they are kind of, Mike Mccready is welcome into the fold, so that the duo of Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament grows into Stone Gossard, Jeff Ament, and Mike Mccready. So the three of them together begin to record some demos, all instrumental stuff. None of them decide to pick up the microphone and start singing vocals. And there's no drummer at this point either. So they are close to a band, but they are still missing a few key elements. So they give the tape to former Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer Jack Irons. He had kind of been away from the Peppers, and he was a highly sought-after name for their band, and for many bands. Irons was friends with somebody out of California, out of San Diego, who we'll bring up in a minute. Irons turns down the offer to be with the band because his personal stuff, I believe his wife was pregnant, and he had a better offer from another band to pay him more money just to do a tour with them, so less commitment, more money. So he declines. But, the guys, they tell him, Ament and Gossard kind of say, hey, well, if you're not interested, pass it around to any vocalists, any singers because we need a singer as well. And the guy I was referring to, who Jack Irons was friends with, is Eddie Vedder, who becomes the singer for Pearl Jam. He is the present-day singer. He is vocalist on 10 as well. So Vedder gets a hold of the tape from Jack Irons. Jack says probably something like, hey, there's this band out of Seattle, and they're looking for a vocalist, and I think you could fit the role. And that's how Vedder learns about these tracks. So it's a 5-track demo, and Eddie begins to write lyrics over it. So he writes some lyrics, I believe, to 3 songs. He records them, and he mails them back to Gossard. So Stone Gossard listens to what he hears, and they like what they hear. And Eddie goes up, they meet, they begin to kind of gel together, and they begin to form a new band known as Mookie Blaylock, who was an NBA player, played for the Nets, wore number 10, and that was the original name of Pearl Jam, Mookie Blaylock. So that is kind of the roots of Pearl Jam. They began performing in late 1990 and about a year later, 10 is released under the title Pearl Jam. Another group kind of forms known as Temple of the Dog. Temple of the Dog comes out in the same pretty similar context to when Pearl Jam makes their appearance. Temple of the Dog consisted of Matt Cameron, drummer of Soundgarden, and present-day drummer of Pearl Jam, big-time drummer in the Seattle music scene, Chris Cornell, Soundgarden singer, Mike Mccready, Pearl Jam guitarist, Stone Gossard, Pearl Jam guitarist, Jeff Ament, Pearl Jam vocalist. And the big song from Temple of the Dog, Hunger Strike, features Eddie Vedder playing a role on vocals as well. But Temple of the Dog really only released one album. It's kind of a Seattle-based supergroup, so to speak, kind of playing they were all friends with Andy Wood, and they all kind of come together after his death, and they put out a Temple of the Dog record. So that's kind of another thing that helps to promote Pearl Jam and their sound and kind of their presence in the Seattle music scene. Now, I've mentioned they have Pearl Jam, Mookie Blaylock, at the time, had 2 guitarists, a bassist, and a vocalist, but the one key piece they are missing is a drummer. And a drummer was pretty hard to keep consistent for Pearl Jam in the early days, really until they get Matt Cameron in about 2000, the late 90s, somewhere in that point. They don't have a consistent drummer. So Dave Crewson is the original drummer for Mookie Blaylock. He plays on the album. He plays some tracks on the album, but then a year later, he's replaced with a guy named Matt Chamberlain. Matt Chamberlain isn't interested or something. He wasn't super involved, so Matt Chamberlain leaves, and then another drummer joins, Dave. I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. It's got a Z in there. I think it's Abruzzi. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but we'll just call him Dave A for now. Dave A joins after Matt Chamberlain and kind of becomes a consistent drummer. But Crewson drums on a lot of the tracks on this album. But by the time touring gets around and the band kind of becomes bigger and their next album and their third album comes out, Dave A is the drummer on those tracks. So the drummer, is a pretty important role in the band. It's kind of like compared to the heartbeat of the band. But when that's inconsistent, it can make recording and can make consistency and all of that other things that go into being a successful band musically. It can make it much more difficult, but Pearl Jam nonetheless endures. So they go through several drummers, and eventually they go from Mookie Blaylock to deciding and settling on the name Pearl Jam. And I have a quote here that demonstrates why they call themselves Pearl Jam. So here's a quote from Eddie Vedder. "I've got some Indian in me, and it turns out that she used to make this kind of hallucinogenic preserve. I wish it was passed down through the family. If it was stopped about a generation before me. I never got to taste any myself, but I'm still in search of that elusive recipe for Pearl Jam." So that, I think, could be kind of interpreted, Eddie's talking about some old family recipe that he doesn't have anymore for something called Pearl Jam. Pearl Jam also could be used to refer to as semen. So, whatever the meaning of Pearl Jam is, they eventually settle on that name, and in the spring of 91, they begin recording for 10, and in late summer, early fall of 91, 10 is released, and the rest is history. So that's kind of the background, the build-up of how Pearl Jam came to be, the different groups and different players coming from different areas of the country, obviously mostly West Coast based with Seattle and California playing the major roles. So we get into the album. Once it's finally recorded, once all the stuff is kind of put together, the album is released. So the first track, opening track, is called Once. Now, all the lyrics are by Eddie Vedder musically. There's different writers for different tracks. So this one was penned by Stone Gossard, who was a big influence musically. Obviously, this was kind of Gossard and Immense project initially, as other players were welcomed into the fold. So they're fostering this kind of child, so to speak. So singles were released from this album. Alive, which we'll get to later, is the first single released, and Once is the B-side to that. So, and this was also part of the 5-track demo tape that was mailed to Vedder in kind of hopes that they could recruit a vocalist or a drummer from this. And they obviously end up recruiting and keeping a vocalist. The lyrics that Eddie writes in Once go part of a trilogy that he refers to as Mama, Son. So Alive would be part A in the trilogy. Part B in the trilogy, Once, is focused on someone going into kind of a rampage, going on a killing spree, a descent into madness. It's a heavy track, it's an angry track, and it's really emotional. The lyrics saying, once upon a time I could control myself, kind of dealing again with that, descent into madness, that kind of just ferocity and anger that is kind of felt. It's a very heavy track. It's a strong opening to the album. This track itself, once it kind of picks up and gets into the flow and the groove of it, it has kind of an eerie kind of noise, we'll call it, just kind of building up, and then we get to the guitar tone, which is kind of not a clean tone by any means, and the song kind of picks up. But that kind of eerie noise is part of something called Master Slave, they referred to as, and that will come back later when we talk about the final track on the album, Release. But Once is kind of part of the three-part trilogy. The trilogy includes Alive, and then it goes to Once, and then it goes to Footsteps. Footsteps, which we're not going to talk much about today because it's not featured on the album, at least the original release of the album. Footsteps is a good song and had been featured on, I think, certain greatest hits and certain kind of extended editions, but it's a good song nonetheless. But we're talking about Once now. Once is a very heavy song. It's a great start to the album, and I love the vocal performance. Eddie's vocals really shine throughout the album, and it's something that the listener can attach themselves to, and it's really unique, and was often copied later on throughout the 90s. But that is the first track to the album. That is Once, and we shift now to track 2, Even Flow. Now, most people who are rock fans have probably heard Even Flow. The song really rocks. It's really got a great groove driven by that bass line. So it was the second single released from Pearl Jam. Something interesting Pearl Jam did, the album was released in August of 1991. However, some of the singles were not released until 1992. So the singles, which normally come before the album release, kind of came after the album was released. So kind of switching up the sequence of events. So Even Flow as a single was released after Even Flow was released as an album. There was a music video associated with it, which is focused on a live performance of the song. When recording this song, it was noted that they did a bunch of takes, a large number of takes on the track, and they never really felt like they got it right. Even today, they wouldn't, some of the members, namely Stone Gossard, I believe, so from what I've read, still might not have been too happy with the way that it finished or the take that they used. It might have been the best, worst take that was used on the album. I believe that's how Jeff Ament put it. They never got the take they wanted, but nevertheless, the song has a great groove driven by that kind of groovy bass line, and this tuning is in a drop D type tuning, so it adds beef, and that adds kind of the heaviness to it as well. The lyrics focus on homelessness. Friesen rests his head on a pillow made of concrete. Kind of a homeless man maybe suffers with some mental illness. Can't help when he's happy, he looks insane. Even flow, thoughts arrive like butterflies. He don't know, so he chases them away. Kind of just this experience of a homeless man, just kind of might suffer with some mental illness, and just, you know, it's not his fault, the circumstances he's in. It's just kind of the way things are. The song is a legendary Pearl Jam song. It's a live staple. I believe it has been played over 800 times in concert. It was listed on VH1's Top 100 Greatest Hard Rock Songs, clocking in at number 30 on that list. It's a common live staple for the band, and it's an incredible song. Definitely something I would recommend to a Pearl Jam fan who's trying to get into the act and doesn't really know where to start. Even Flow is a tremendous starting place. Which we shift now to track 3, which is another tremendous starting place for Pearl Jam fans who want to hear Pearl Jam, want to know what all the fuss is about, and that is Alive. It's the debut single from the band. It was released about 50 days, maybe 51, before the album was released, so it was the first taste the public got of Pearl Jam. As I said, Once is kind of part B of this trilogy known as Mama Son. Alive is part A. Alive is a very personal song for Eddie Vedder. Eddie Vedder, who had a stepfather who he believed was his real father for most of his life, until some point in his teens, his mother revealed to him that this was actually his stepfather, and his biological father had died years ago, so Eddie never got the chance to meet him, never had any real connection with him. So that's kind of what the song is related to. It was one of the 5 tracks on the demo that Eddie kind of wrote lyrics to and added vocals over and mailed back and eventually got him into the band. The song was carried over from the Mother Love Bone days. It's one of the few, I believe, to be carried over. The lyrics, as I said, were written by Vedder, but the music, I believe, had been pretty consistent. I believe the song was called Dollar Short by Mother Love Bone, and it kind of was shifted to Alive. So, our protagonist, our character here, which isn't really a character because it's kind of it's partly based on nonfiction, Eddie's life, learns that their father is dead and that the person who they believe to be their father is actually not their biological father. The song takes kind of a weird turn, and it shifts to where the mother, while telling this to the son, the fictional son in this story, begins to pursue a incestuous relationship because of the similarities between the father and the son. That is not based in reality. I'm not really sure why that was added in, but that's kind of an interpretation of what part of the song is talking about. But Alive, nonetheless, is kind of about that pain, that kind of just that shocking realization that, oh my gosh, this is kind of the way it is, and the saying, oh, I'm still alive, like kind of saying that in a tone that's, oh, why am I still alive, not wanting to be that way anymore. However, audience interpretation of it is kind of, it's a hopeful song, it's an uplifting song, oh, I'm still alive. And Eddie has kind of talked about how the audience and the fans have lifted the curse around the lyrics that were personal to him, and they've kind of twisted it into a positive spin that has made it great and has really taken a positive turn on it and is much better for everyone than what was originally intended. And as I said, the music mostly came from Mother Love Bone, but a member of Pearl Jam who was not in Mother Love Bone, Mike Mccready. Mike Mccready adds the lead guitar. He adds guitar solos. So the guitar solo on this track is one of the best. Guitar World's top 100 guitar solos of all time. Alive's guitar solo ranks number 44. It's a highly recognized solo. It's really tremendous. According to Mccready, it had ripped off She, the solo in She, the Kiss song, the solo by Ace Frehley, which had ripped off the Doors' 5-to-1 solo. So it had kind of not to say it's a ripoff or it's an invalid solo, but maybe borrowed, or we'll just say influenced. I think that's fair to say. Plenty of artists have been influenced, so I don't think that's a negative thing. And I think, before kind of doing further research into it, I have always kind of thought of it as a positive song, and especially the chorus kind of lends that. And it's a fun song to listen to. It's another live staple, another song that really just, you will definitely hear it at every Pearl Jam show. It's one of their best tracks in my opinion, and might be the best track on the album. But so Footsteps, that I said, was kind of the conclusion of the trilogy we're not going to talk about today. So we have Alive, the kind of realization, the introduction of, this shocking information into the character's life, character descending into madness, committing, acts of violence, and then Footsteps, which isn't on this album but is available to be heard on different platforms, kind of the law catching up to him and kind of facing their punishment for the actions that they commit in once. So that's kind of how the sequence, the trilogy, if you will, is laid out in the pattern of what is called, what Eddie refers to as Mama Son. So the album then shifts to track number 4, Why Go. Why Go is a really kind of groovy song. I love the drums on this one. I love how it starts off. The drum rhythm really carries the song. It's really central to this song. And it's inspired by a friend of Vedder's who was committed to a psychiatric facility for having a little bit of pot, and it's related to kind of lashing out at parents, as the chorus kind of says, like, why go home? Like, why go home to this environment, to someone who's going to commit you for something that is unnecessarily so. If you'll give me 1 second to pull up the lyrics here, because the meaning to this song wasn't immediately clear to me until I read further in the lyrics and kind of looked closer. So, she scratches a letter into a wall made of stone. Maybe someday another child won't feel as alone as she does. It's been 2 years and counting since they put her in this place. She's been diagnosed by some stupid fuck, and mommy agrees. Yeah. So clearly the character, the narrator, whoever, has been diagnosed by some stupid fuck. They disagree with the diagnosis. They don't believe that they actually belong there, and that this is an overreaction from their parents. According to Pearl Jam 20, a book about kind of the band's career, the friend of Vedder's who was committed to a psychiatric facility had been committed over a small possession of pot or maybe some marijuana. So, that might be kind of where the disagreement comes in with the need to be there. So the person kind of fakes their way out of their psychiatric facility and kind of has this feeling of why go home? Why would I want to see, my mother who put me here, this negative relationship that our character has with their parents. And there's a song on the second album called Leash, which kind of is the sequel to this track. When the person returns home, they're put under these strict guidelines and they're supposed to, bite the leash, fight back against authority. So that's kind of the part 2 to this song, but musically it's a straightforward rocker. I like the drum track. It's got a great rhythm and a great groove, and the chorus is great, and it's a great song live. So another great track from the band here. And we shift into track number 5 on the album, and this is a tremendous song, Black. It was originally called I think it was like E ballad or E minor ballad, something along those lines. It's a ballad track, and it's related to the end of relationships, kind of young love, dying hard, that kind of themes which a lot of teens and younger people going through relationships and getting, experiencing brushes with love kind of attached to and feel, it's relatable content. It was released as a single after the album released, just as Even Flow was. It's one of their most popular songs. It's a really pretty song and a really emotional lyrics. It kind of gets more emotional and more intense as the song wears on, which with the ending verse going something like, I know someday you'll have a beautiful life. I know you'll be a star in somebody else's sky, but why can't it be mine? Our narrator, our protagonist, our central character here clearly feels, regret and just upset about, why is this person leaving me? Why are you going to be great, but why can't it be with me? And it's a lot of emotion, and it's a lot of pain, and it's a lot of hurt, which is not an uncommon theme in grunge, and it's not an uncommon theme for Pearl Jam here. They deal with a lot of dark subject matter, and that is clear. It was also one of the original 5 tracks from the demo. I don't believe Eddie mailed back. I believe 3 he only mailed back. I don't believe Black was one of them. I think he wrote that maybe on the way up to Seattle. It's a beautiful, emotional piece, and it fits perfectly in the middle of the album, and it goes right in with the band's kind of theme and just kind of their vibe, and I love the song. And it's a great song to be played live. You get the whole crowd into it, the do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Definitely love that song. So the emotion from this song, we take that and we transfer it into track 6, Jeremy. You want to talk about a dark song. If you don't know, the lyrics are based on a Texas teen who committed suicide in front of his high school class on January 8th, 1991. Eddie Vedder was reading the newspaper and just kind of picked that out. It's not meant to encourage suicide or kind of glorify it. The music video, which created a lot of controversy, begins with kind of details on the day. It's sunny 64 degrees, and this happened, and then it ends with, and it's sunny and 64 degrees. Sort of to say, this life will go on, it's not to say life will go on. I want to pull this up because I don't want to, water it down or say, this is the way it is when it might not be that easy. Let's see. Sorry for the lull in the action. I want to get this quote from Vedder correct when he's talking about Jeremy, because the song is pretty powerful and pretty deep, and I think it deserves its proper recognition. Okay, let's see. Okay, lyrics. Okay, here we go. So, when asked about the song, Vedder explains. So here's his quote. It came from a small paragraph in a newspaper in which you kill yourself. Let me start over. It came from a small paragraph in a paper, which means you kill yourself and you make a big old sacrifice and try to get your revenge. That all you're going to end up with is a paragraph in a newspaper. 64 degrees and cloudy in a suburban neighborhood. That's the beginning of the video. And that's the same thing in the end. It does nothing. Nothing changes. The world goes on and you're gone. The best revenge is to live on and prove yourself. Be stronger than those people, and then you can come back. So I guess that's Vedder's kind of quote about the lyrics and about the song. The song is pretty straightforward. It's not really there's no innuendo, no kind of second meaning. It pretty clearly describes a narrative just of Jeremy, and the tale of, him killing himself in front of the class. It got heavy MTV play, as MTV was a hot commodity at this time, something pursued by a lot of artists. It even got so much attention from MTV that it won 1993 MTV Best Video of the Year. The video caused controversy, however, as can be expected when it's dealing with such a heavy topic such as suicide and having to show that in kind of a graphic nature, so much so that the original version of the video had to be scrapped and remade for a video that was more fit for MTV and others. It can be found on YouTube, I believe, March of 2020 or whenever, sometime in 2020 on National Gun Awareness Day or something. That might not be the exact name, but an event or a day centered on gun awareness. They released the original video on YouTube, but it caused some controversy. It was a very popular song with dark themes and kind of a dark music. Key A, kind of really bass driven. Doom 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 doom. Bang bang. At home and drawing pictures of mountaintops with him on top. Lemon yellow sun. It's a song I love to sing along to, oddly enough. If you don't really stop and think, oh, I'm singing about, a song about suicide, but, it is a pretty dark song to sing to, and it's a live staple. It's one of their biggest songs, and it's something I enjoy, even if it's darker in nature and if it's kind of more intense and more serious, it's still a good song nonetheless, and that doesn't take away from the quality of the track. So from there we shift to track 7, Oceans, which has a funny story of how the lyrics were written. One day at the recording studio, not the studio, but the rehearsal space, someone gave Eddie some change to go outside and fill the parking meter, feed the meter. So he goes outside and he gets locked out of the rehearsal space, and they're in there jamming, and it begins to rain, and he's locked out, and he can hear Jeff Amen's bass vibrating through the walls of the basement that they're rehearsing in, and he kind of just takes that and he just kind of writes lyrics to it, and that's why the vocal melody matches the bass line. The lyrics are focused on his love of surfing and, just the ocean and the current and the waves, and it's pretty straightforward lyrically. The features timpani instead of drums in the percussion section, played by Dave Bruson. And when they went to mix it, which actually happened in England, they included pepper shakers and a fire extinguisher to further the percussive section there. So that's an interesting little tidbit. It's just pretty simple song, pretty straightforward, nothing too complex, happening musically, just about a love for one surfboard. So we move from Oceans into track 8, which is Porch. Porch is a tremendous live song. The meaning is kind of open to interpretation here, as some of these tracks are down the stretch. So, as I mentioned, it's a great live song. On the album, the studio recorded version is 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and live they can stretch it into a 10-minute performance. Back in the day, in the early 90s, Eddie was known for his stage antics, which included stage dives and climbing to tremendous heights on stage using the scaffolding and jumping down. And Porch was often a song where he would perform these crazy acts and just awe-inspiring jumps, which the band often marvels at later in their career, that our lead singer could have died doing some of these things. It's quite a risk, but when you're young, you don't care about the risk as much. So the meaning of the song is open to interpretation. Some people, draw different meanings from it, which I think is good. MTV Unplugged, which is big in the 90s as well, Pearl Jam did in the early 90s. They played this song, and Eddie Vedder wrote on his arm pro-choice, so people are trying to see if there's any abortion-linked message in there. I'm not sure if that can be interpreted. I think maybe. It's all about how you read it, which I think is an interesting and unique thing about music. So it's up to you. Personally, I can't really draw a specific meaning from it. I think might be some kind of anger with society, as the opening line indicates, what the fuck is this world coming to or running to? Maybe kind of, a sense of the world ending, or kind of just fed up with the way things are. Nonetheless, Porch really can turn in a great musical performance. Aside from what the lyrics are talking about, it's a great jam session live, and it's a great just song to play air guitar to. So we move on to track number 8, Garden, another song which has a meaning that's kind of unclear, possibly related to society. It's very open-ended. It's a softer musically song, and it kind of shifts into a heavier chorus. The meaning of the garden, or whatever the garden represents, it's unclear, and it's a quality song nonetheless. And I like Eddie's vocals on this one. This is something where where lyrics and meaning are kind of hard to interpret. You just sit back and kind of listen to his vocal uniqueness and just that tone, and it's very rich, and it's very something I'm a big fan of, to say the least. But don't have too many notes on Garden. We move on to track number 10, Deep. This song is about drug use. Jeff Ament had it came from an experience of his where he was walking through Seattle, and he just looks up and sees this abandoned, this building, and just a homeless guy shooting up, sticking the needle deep. Just kind of the need and dependence on drugs, and that's kind of what Eddie writes the lyrics around. It has a very heavy sound, might be the heaviest track on the album in my opinion. I like the wah-like effect that they put on the guitar, and then Mccready is really shredding. Mccready is probably one of the most underrated guitarists in the business, but sticks the needle deep. Not much more to it than that. He doesn't like the view, but he sinks himself deep. So, he's sticking the needle deep. He doesn't like the way things are. He gets high. So, that's just kind of the way it is. Which, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty, it's pretty fair, But give me 1 second, folks, here. I'm going to take a brief intermission here. I'll be back in just a little bit. So hang on just a second. Okay, so I'm sorry for that brief interruption. I was getting a phone call there, but deep, straightforward. It's about drugs. But it's a heavy song, and it kind of shows that they can make an emotional song like Black, and they can also make a heavier kind of sounding song like Deep. So we switch now, transition to the last song on the album, Release. And this one is a doozy. Oh my goodness. It focuses back on the loss of his father, and overall just kind of a theme of loss. Eddie's going through the loss of his father, and the band is going through the loss of Andy Wood, who had kind of been the guy before Eddie got there, and they were expecting to go far with Andrew Wood, but, other things got in the way. So it's an emotional track, this kind of droning riff by Gossard, which is clear. Just a lulling track, just Vedder's voice just kind of rings out and just kind of washes over the listener here. It's got a similar groove, kind of this lulling ending, like the last 4 minutes of the track, which is part of that master-slave kind of dealio that opens up the album, and just kind of this drone of noise that they would kind of do sometimes at the end of recording sessions. The lyrics just kind of flowed out of Eddie. Most of the lyrics flowed out of him in one take. And it's just kind of an emotional track, and it really just displays his vocal strength. I'm a huge fan of this track, and just the way he can just belt it out. I do my best in the shower, but I'm not going to demonstrate for you guys today. But Release is an incredibly emotional track, and just kind of a great finish to the album. It just kind of fades into just nothingness. It's the release point of the album. So my final thoughts here today, this is regarded as one of rock's best debut records. It's incredible from start to finish. It's number 15 on Guitar World's top 100 greatest albums of all time. Certified 13 times platinum. It's the best-selling Pearl Jam album, and it's the one that started it all. So I'm a huge fan of most of Pearl Jam stuff. So without this album, Pearl Jam wouldn't be here. So I gotta give my props up to this album. So now comes the time for the rating. If I had to rate this album on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give it a 10 out of 10. This album is perfect. I love this album. I listened to it probably 2 or 3 times in preparation for this episode, and I could listen to some of the tracks a few more times. A big fan. If you haven't heard Pearl Jam or anything related to them, this is a tremendous starting point. So that is all I've got for you folks here today. Let's see what we got coming up next week. We're talking Judas Priest versus Iron Maiden. Who the better new wave British heavy metal band is, and why. So we're going to get into both of those bands, their careers, and just kind of their peaks, and just who's preferred by the fans and who kind of is my personal favorite. So we're going to get into that next week. I hope you guys enjoy this episode here today. And as always, never stop rocking.